Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Criterion 40. I am Joe from Create Context, and today we are talking about the film Pickpocket. Robert Bresson's 1959 film Pickpocket is a masterpiece of subtle storytelling. The film centers on Mikkel, played by Martin LaSalle, and his slow burn into the depravity of a life of crime. This film is tremendously influential with its minimalistic filmmaking techniques and close-up shots of technical blocking scenes. Pickpocket is a slow burn and one that audiences and critics struggled with at the time. Bresson's earlier film, A Man Escaped, was a larger, more epic narrative and, in many ways, follows the opposite type of narrative as Pickpocket. A Man Escaped is a daring film about a man escaping from a Nazi prison where Pickpocket follows Mikkel as he makes his way into confinement. This didn't resonate with audiences at the time, but over the years has found an audience that truly realized the genius of Robert Bresson. I like to view Pickpocket as a companion piece to A Man Escaped. In that film, Fontaine, the main protagonist, based on real-life prisoner Andre Davini, begins the film in a Nazi prison. Throughout the course of the film, he devises a plan and eventually succeeds in escaping this prison, finally able to leave the world of imprisonment and confinement behind him. Pickpocket, on the other hand, begins with Mikkel as a free man. He starts learning the ins and outs of basic thievery, pickpocketing. He starts pickpocketing unknown civilians for personal gain, and he eventually teams up with some unsavory characters who help him master these skills. Mikkel has worked successfully for years, scamming and stealing from various people around France. He is arrested earlier in the film, but is let go due to a lack of evidence, and that only embodies him more to continue his life of crime. That arresting officer, though, continues to follow Mikkel, waiting for him to slip up. Once he finally does and is arrested on the spot, the film leaves Michael imprisoned for his actions that he's committed throughout the movie. A Man Escaped ends with freedom, while Pickpocket ends with confinement. All of this comes back to the big ideas and themes of Pickpocket. We see a man slowly falling deeper and deeper into this life of crime. It's a life he's forced into out of exasperation, and then one that he can't find his way out of until it eventually lands him in prison. Once he's in this world, this life of crime, there's no way for him to stop, both for the monetary benefits and for the rush that he feels every time he commits a crime. These themes and their influences can be seen in many films made decades later. One film that I find a huge connection to with Pickpocket is the 2001 film Requiem for a Dream by Darren Aronofsky. That film is a little less subtle with its themes of addiction, but it follows four different people who fall further and further into their addictions until it eventually destroys them. It's a film that, much like Pickpocket, ends on a dour note. Even though these films both end in tragedy, we can't help but root for the protagonists. We want each one to get better, even though we know they simply can't. Their circumstances and addictions have brought them to a place they can't escape from, and Robert Bresson doesn't give them a happy ending. He doesn't create a big spectacle or make any grand statements. He just shows us with technical perfection the life of a thief. Where Pickpocket sets itself apart is with its minimalistic and subdued style of filmmaking. Pickpocket is filled with these tight close-ups of the pickpocketing. It's truly masterful to see on film these intricate Rube Goldberg type schemes being pulled off by Mikkel and his crew. The camera is able to perfectly capture each steal in a way few filmmakers would be able to. Many films about crime do not have the restraint to pull off what Bresson is able to do so well. These films, movies like Heat or Point Blank, can only show off heists in spectacular fashion. These are the selling points of those movies, and it's what audiences come for. But with Pickpocket, we see the slow, methodical con starting to take shape. We see the hours Mikkel spends taking a watch off a leg post, learning to hone his craft, only for the few seconds it takes him in real life to nab a watch from an unsuspecting civilian's wrist. Even though it's subdued and subtle, it is just as thrilling to watch all of these little brief cons that he's able to pull off. Pickpocket had a tremendous impact on film, and we can see this movie's DNA everywhere from 1970 masterpieces to current blockbusters. Besson follows one man in his film Pickpocket, a troubled man who gets by the only way he knows how, and he never gets a redemption arc and instead is forced to pay for his crimes. Paul Schrader, the famous writer, has often commented on the influence this film had on his screenplay for Taxi Driver, Martin Scorsese's 1976 film about a man who is also an outcast from society and forced to come to terms with the changing world around him. Taxi Driver is a little bit more dreamlike, but each of these movies force the audience to be with a lead character that we don't really like. We can't relate to them very well, but we do want them to be better. It's a filmmaking and writing technique that leads with empathy, something that is becoming more and more rare in cinema now. As cinema gets more and more cynical, we start to lose the empathy that we had from films like Pickpocket. In this story of Mikkel, we see a man who has committed terrible acts. He abandons his sick mother, he ostracizes his friends, and he steals from innocent people. But throughout the whole movie, we feel empathy for the character. We start to see his situation the same way he does, as one with no way out. The last shot of Pickpocket is Mikkel in prison, reaching his hands through his prison cell bars and grasping for the hand of Jean, the only person who seems to have truly cared for his well-being throughout the entire movie. And he realizes in that last frame that maybe that's what he was searching for. What he's been reaching out for this whole movie wasn't money or someone else's wallet, but it was companionship, a friend, someone to love him. It's a heartbreaking ending, but one that truly pulls off and sums up the entire theme of the film perfectly with this one shot. And it's a feat that only a filmmaker like Besson could pull off. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of the Criterion 40. We'll be back next week with another one. We'll be back on Friday with a weekly movie minute. If you guys like this, please give us a subscribe. That'd be super cool. And I'll see you next time. The Criterion 40 is a Create Context podcast. Head over to createcontext.com for more film, reviews, and analysis. Our theme song is Hindsight by Shiloh, provided by the Riot Games Creator Safe playlist. We drop new episodes every Tuesday at 8 a.m.